Hello. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Hockaday responders once again. This week relating them to the concepts learned in Chapter 8. And question 1 asks, using concepts from this week's chapter, describe the primary problems to be solved in the Hockaday case. First of all, the concept of problem solving is defined as a multi-stage process for moving an issue, situation, or state from an undesirable to a more desirable condition. Specifically in this case study, the problems that needed to be solved were first creating a new structure that allows for an even workload throughout the organization, while redesigning groups accordingly based on location and allocating them, deciding on the best structure for their new group organization. Different problems emerge throughout the case study, though, that need to be solved. They could be seen during the crises that when all employees and leaders must work together to reach the solutions. Some ethical issues arise when people are having disagreements, and everyone involved must learn how to find indeterminate solutions for these issues. Question 2 asks, describe the choices Jill has for problem solving and decision making processes. When it comes to problem solving and decision making, leaders have a multitude of choices as to what processes they want to use to go about making these decisions. Some specific choices that she would have would be to use the classic technique of brainstorming with her subordinates to reach a decision either by consensus or majority rule. Consensus would be more difficult because it would require more employees reaching a certain extent of agreement. Whereas majority rule requires more than 50% voting on a certain decision for it to be put into place. Section 8.7.3 also describes the decision tree process, which some organizations use to determine the nature of the problem. And while depending on what choice she uses and what process that the organization utilizes, they should always apply bounded rationality, interaction process skills, fact-finding, and evaluation skills, and while paying attention to relevancy, sufficiency, and plausibility of information. Question 3, which of the problem-solving processes discussed in Chapter 8 should Jill consider? Personally, I think the decision tree process stood out to be interesting. It is defined in the chapter specifically as being leaders of decision-making groups asking a series of questions to determine the nature of the problem, consequence of decision, and the types of involvement needed to get it. And yes, so the types of involvement needed, This, combined with brainstorming, I feel would be a very beneficial tool for the organization, because Jill would be getting an input from all employees within the organization, getting a feel for what they think would be the best solution for all issues that she's questioning, as well as they could provide solutions that perhaps she hasn't thought of herself. It kind of just gets everyone involved, and if the more involvement that she gets in this process, she can assume the higher involvement she will get throughout tasks in the future. It is just a great tool to base things like that off of. I think that it stood out as I think it would be beneficial for Hockaday to use. Let's see now. Question 4, according to the text, what are the skills needed for problem solving and decision making? Section 8.8.1 of the chapter states that skills needed for problem solving and decision making include interaction process skills. These are skills based on an understanding of the communication process, an awareness of individual predispositions, strategies, and tactics in certain situations. Also, they mention fact-finding and evaluation skills, which are defined as skills that assist in the discovery and criticism of information used in problem solving and decision making. These are the main skills defined in the chapter as being the most important for deciding when decision making and problem solving. I'll kind of go into more detail in the next question, a little bit more of more just a little bit more into detail of what they should consider while displaying these skills. So question 5, what else from this week's chapter should be considered or applied in this case? Okay. So, like I was saying, I quickly touched on it. They should always consider the characteristics of information when deciding. This is meaning the relevancy, the sufficiency, and the plausibility of the information. So does it matter to our situation? Is it credible? Is it realistic? Should we base anything in our goals off of this information? Also, Section 8.2 states that problem solving and decision making have ethical dimensions. I kind of mentioned previously that there was a problem that concerned ethical issues, and so they could having Jill realize that all aspects of problem solving and decision making have ethical dimensions. Not just it's not a simple issue that could be looked over. It needs to be addressed and handled properly. Also, the chapter states that the 4 factors of communication important in an organization is organization culture, decision and problem issues, communication competencies, and technical competencies. I think this is important for Hockaday to understand because although they are virtually based, they might think that their technical competencies are more important than anything else, but realistically, communication competencies and culture and things of that nature are just as important. They could be great at everything that has to do with the technical aspects of their job, but if they're lacking in communication competency, then they're not going to be successful overall. And I think also the chapter starts with the quote of people who rarely, if ever, work face to face are challenged to understand interpersonal dynamics important for collaboration. Being again that Hockaday Responders is virtual based, they kind of are at a disadvantage to begin with when compared to normal organizations. So for the leaders such as Jill to understand this and expect that it might be a little bit more difficult than they may be used to get their workers to collaborate and work together, that the more successful she will be, and she could prepare accordingly and have the proper processes in place for decision making and whatnot. And I think that kind of touches base on everything I wanted to discuss for this chapter. All right, thank you.